Okay, I'll start off. The first Zappa album that you listened to?
That's a good question. Probably very conscious. It might be Hot Rats. To be open or be ready for this kind of music. Maybe Free Code was too early for a 14-year-old. I think that was about 14 when I went to a warehouse and went through the LPs and I saw, Free Code. They're too old. They're just too old, you know. Put it back. And later I started to get all the Zappa LPs I could get. I was really wondering what's going on, but I did not sit down and enjoy it. I analyzed it. You can talk about how to analyze music, you know, with headphones. That was a ritual. Every night when I went to bed, I had music, just to learn.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. The first album I heard was Shake Your Booty.
Generation later.
Yeah, and I got hold of that from a friend when I started college. I was 16 when I went to college, and I had a friend called Gerald, and he introduced me to Shake Your Booty. He had it on a cassette or something, and I just loved it. And then he had the Bongo Fury album, and I borrowed that for months and months.
That's the old one, that Bongo Fury.
Yeah, but that was just so interesting, and even today, I think it's markedly different to a lot of other Zappa albums.
Completely different.
You know, it's really raw, raucous, bluesy. Of course, you've got Captain Beefheart, which gives it another sort of characteristic.
The most brilliant parts of the concert were his
when he
communication.
Yeah,
so funny, so strange mixture of words.
Yes,
you know.
Yeah.
You wouldn't use these words in this connection, you know, but he used an aha.
It always seemed a little bit edgy to me. It was really exciting and edgy, and I often would seek out recordings where he was talking because I just was so intrigued by the way, I mean, sort of anything could happen, that somebody in the audience could say something and he would respond, and then he would develop something from that. Or he was, you know, maybe he was not in a good mood or something. I was just like listening to what he would say, and it was just very edgy, a little bit dangerous.
So you went from Shake Your Booty back to in his catalogue.
All I knew was Shake Your Booty and Bongo Fury. Those were the only two albums I knew, and they were hanging around for 3-4 years before I eventually found out about his other music.
Yeah, his planet is bigger.
And I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I had already thought that Bongo Fury and Shake Your Booty were amazing albums. And then of course, I got Overnight Sensation and One Size Fits All and Apostrophe. I was just like, oh my God,
that can flip your mind.
This is, it was a real shift. We had a music library at the university where I was studying jazz, and that was a goldmine of music from the jazz era. You know, it was one of the most inspiring times.
It was a musical world.
Yeah.
Huh? Hi,
yeah. It was just so inspiring, and it was the most exciting time for me because I was so open to everything. You know, I just wanted to take all of it in and do something with it.
But you had time.
And I had time, yeah.
No, you weren't married then, and nothing. No, it's nothing bad to be married, but it gives you more space.
It does.
The first word in this song is discorporate. It means to leave your body.
Discorporate and come. The first word in this song, you know, is incorporate. That means to leave your body. Incorporate. What's going on? What is this? Again.
Yeah.
It's like the Christmas calendar, You open a door, And with Zappa, it's the same, Every album is another calendar, and every song is another door to open.
I was transcribing the stuff, I know Steve Vai had done it years before, and he's done tremendous work.
Why did he do it?
Because he was passionate about the music.
He was passionate about the music, and he had obviously had really a talent to do it.
He was the really technical guitarist who could play this really unusual stuff. The speech-influenced pieces such as Jazz Discharge Party Hats and The Dangerous Kitchen. He was the first guy and such an inspiration, And even when he did Flexible, the solo album, it's just an amazing album, an amazing feat of guitar playing, because no one else sounded like that. I was listening to lots of guitar players and nobody sounded like Steve Vai. There was this new wave of, metal guitarists in the 80s, with all the long curly permed hair, and they were just playing all this really fast stuff, and it just didn't appeal to me. It left me just cold, there was nothing to it. I was just so disinterested in it. And even now, it's never won me over. But Steve Vai, his playing was to me unique. And the stuff that he did, like you say, the transcribing of the Vinnie Colaiuta drum solos and drum parts for those improvisations. I got the book and I went through a couple of the solos, and I really liked Pink Napkins. I thought that was one of the most beautiful guitar solos Zappa ever played, I mean, one of them, he's done many, but that was just such a beautiful solo and so restrained and open. I think it's just a trio. It's Patrick O'Hearn on bass, and I think it's Terry Bossio on drums.
Was a beautiful bass player.
Yeah.
Patrick O'Hearn for certain stuff, for the softer stuff.
Lovely, lovely playing. I had an interview with Mike Keneally, and he was saying that he went through the book, and when he joined the Zappa band, he could play all the stuff, but it was more of a motor skills, really, things that he had heard from the recordings that he could play exactly like the recordings.
And that was needed.
That was needed, and he even, by his own admission, said he was surprised that he got the Frank Zappa gig, because although he could play all the songs, he didn't really know what it looked like on paper. And it wasn't until the other members of the band, the veterans who had been in the band for many years.
Yeah, the veterans. I've never thought of this. Oi, that's pressure.
Yeah, exactly. You're the new guy. But they showed him. They said, look, well, this is a quintuplet, this is a septuplet, this is what it looks like, this is how it works. So he went from an intuitive interpretation to a more scientific interpretation. Now he could see what he was actually playing, what it looked like on paper. Mike Keneally did some amazing things on the guitar with Zappa as well. In the interview, I said to him, that Zombie Wolf, the guitar parts he played on that, I was just like, that was really impressive.
How can you do it?
Yeah.
Does he a lot of practice, or is it a lot of talent there as well?
Oh, he's really talented, Mike Keneally. He's a pianist, and he writes some beautiful compositions. There's an album that he did called Wood and Smoke, and it's just beautiful. Mm-hmm. Really, really clever compositions. musicians that have, made significant contributions to the way his music sounded. We talk a lot about Zappa the composer, but sometimes you overlook the musicians that played in the band, how technically proficient they were, and how the result of his musical ideas often were realized by these musicians and gave it a life of its own. Yes, he's the composer, he wrote the music, but without the feel that you get, the interaction you get from these really world-class musicians, it's not the same.
I think that was because the lineup was very interesting, and these people were independent. They were not Zappa mechanics, they were independent, but they played the Zappa music in a very in a fantastic way. That was a good interpretation. It was not Zappa alone, the dictator alone. They had Grandissimo as well,
Yeah, well, you had Michael Brecker, Randy Brecker.
Wow.
Yeah, serious jazz musicians. And
the drummer, what was the drummer?
Terry Bozzio.
Terry Bozzio was, for me, one of the most emotional drummers ever he had. He was an animal. He was a little kid animal, like a kobold, with two little horns,
But he has so much energy as well. You see the live concerts and
when you see him play,
wow.
And then he sings.
Yeah. The live in the Zappa in New York album, it's a great one because, partly for that reason that he's got these jazz musicians that are not permanent fixtures of the band.
That was very refreshing.
It was refreshing, and there was Dave Samuels was playing tune percussion on a couple of the gigs. And when I was studying jazz, he did a master class around about 91, 92. And he came in and, the classical and jazz musicians, we were all students, we were all sat in the auditorium there, and he just did this amazing stuff. And a few weeks later, I got the Zappa in New York cassette, and I'm just looking through the notes, and I see Dave Samuels there, and I'm just like...
I don't remember.
I would have had so many...
Dave Samuels,
Dave Samuels. I would have had so many questions to ask him, and I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't... I could... Obviously, he was a great jazz musician, but I had no idea he had played with Zappa, and maybe, he wouldn't have taken to those questions. But there were a few things I wanted to ask him, but it was too late because I didn't find out he had a session for him until I bought the cassette weeks later.
So the percussionist that had long-term roles. Eight Man was for a long time, and Ruth Underwood as well. What was the position of Ruth Underwood? I think she was like a pulse of the band. She was very important, even outside of the musical happenings, She was very important for a band. I think a woman inside the army is very important, or within bus drivers, They make less dirty jokes and silly comments. It civilized them, and she had the rule to civilize to a certain degree.
To a degree, yeah. What a wonderful thing to see, this very attractive woman playing this really complicated music with no mistakes, at least mistakes that I'm unable to perceive.
I've seen her live. I mean, in Basel, that was really exciting with Urban Gweder. Urban Gweder was sitting on stage as well. Basel is famous for a suite. It's the old drums in the wars, They were the big drums. So they had these suites in tins like this, only this big. So they had on stage a drum duel between Ruth Underwood with a little lead with a Chester Thompson. And I tell you, that was one of the best drum duels I've ever seen. She was so exciting, and him, of course, But he had everything around him, and she's just he's paradiddle and diddle paradiddle, but she could do. Because before I saw the Ponty band, that was very sophisticated, almost everything instrumental, just with tremendous solos. Ponty had all these fantastic solos.
when he'd seen the Mahavishnu Orchestra, you know, the first time.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, he had Chester Thompson in the band. So he had Ralph
Very
Humphrey.
shortly after that. Yeah.
So he had Ralph Humphrey and Chester Thompson. It's almost like you could perceive it as being, okay, in order for me to compete with a drummer as great as Billy Cobham, I'm going to have to get me 2 drummers. I read an interview with Zappa where he talked about Peter Wolf and Tommy Mars and said, this is what I have to do in order for it to equate to a musician like George Duke. You need 2 keyboard players in the band, because obviously you didn't have George Duke.
I cannot support this, because they're both different styles than George Duke. George Duke had a completely different style, you know.
I think the point he was making was that George Duke could do both. He was obviously fond of George Duke's playing and having him in the band, and you know, but those guys were fantastic as well. Tommy Mars. I mean, when Tommy Mars takes a solo.
He's from the technical point of view and from his humor and his inspiration, his ideas, you know, his singing, you know, his inventions all the time. He's inventing all the time. Zappa does that like this, and he makes a big thing out of it. You know?
I love it when I see on the concerts I've seen that. I love it where Zappa just sits on the stool and just watches him play, you know, and listens. Because with Tommy Mars, he's telling you this story, you know, and he's got the different. He's got the different synthesizers. So one solo's on the Moog, then the solo's on a different keyboard, and so he's building up these timbres and textures, and you can tell that, okay, he's got his standard things that he plays. Like all jazz musicians have standard things, phrases, patterns they play, but he's really going for that in the moment thing, that spontaneous approach to playing, and it's just got single notes. He's building chords, and it's almost orchestral what he's doing.
There was some good music with Steve Vai at the time of the Steve Vai year. And Steve Vai has had this piece written for him, I can't remember the title, but he had to Vai, come over. And he had so little lick, you know, learn it, I forget it. Maybe 3 weeks later, Vai, come up again, I have the second part, you know. And then in the end, he got a piece, something like this.
Yeah, I remember reading a story similar to that. It was like...
that was nice.
Yeah.
The story is... It's a nice story as well, you know. It's very human.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of a theater piece, you know. But the piece is, I don't know.
I can't remember what the piece was. Maybe it was...
Let's get to Baltimore. What's new in Baltimore?
What's new in Baltimore?
Well, the intro. That was a nice...
It's beautiful.
This one night, he came up with this little piece of music that he showed me, and it went like this. Here's another part for it. And he showed me another part, and it went like this.
Yeah, it seemed that the music started to become more and more complex.
But it doesn't sound complex. If you don't know about the bars and anything, you just can listen to it. It has a total flow, you know.
Yeah.
But if you see a tweet, wow, Jesus Christ, you know, rock musician 7/16, and then blah blah.
Yeah, no, it was really complicated, but it's a good example that, you know, music can be complicated but entertaining at the same time. You know.
Urban Gweder, Swiss underground poet, who founded the first underground paper in Switzerland called Hotcha. And Hotcha comes from freak out. In the fade out of a song, you can hear him, Hotcha. And so Hotcha with a sign in the end, you know. Yeah. He made this first underground paper, and of course they fused together in the whole the whole world, the underground press syndicate, and he got Zappa's friend or something for 10 years, you know, and he got a lot of stuff from Frank Zappa and the Fax. He was in contact with the Fax and could just use it, whatever he wanted to use. And so he made a lot of promotion, of course, of Zappa, because it was the concept of all these underground papers then, you know, what Zappa did. And Zappa was somehow a political person, of course, of the new movement, you know. So that was the first letter.
Can I read it out?
Yeah. I mean, that was the first letter Zappa wrote to Edgar Varese, you know.
Yeah.
You know that, so he wrote a letter, you know.
So this for people watching this is a letter written to Urban from 1968. So this is from Frank Zappa. He says, "Dear Urban, almost a year later, I answer your letter. I'm not a very efficient person. I would like to thank you very much for your book that you sent and your considerate thoughts. We will be in Europe from the end of September until October for a total of about 5 weeks. We will be playing at the music festival at Essen, Germany, also in Vienna and a number of other cities. I don't have the schedule just yet. I am enclosing a present for you. I hope you enjoy it."
Lumpy Gravy.
Aha. Lumpy Gravy album, I assume.
Yeah. And later on, of course, they met. I mean, the high point was 73. Okay, here, 73.
Okay, so this...
They met on the Zurich airport.
This is really interesting. So these are pictures from the concert.
Montreux.
So, if you can see this here, this is part of the Montreux, the fated Montreux festival, where...
And the synthesizer of the Don Preston almost burned down, yes. And he asked me if I wanted to buy it. You know, I saw it, I played on it,
right,
in his house.
So Stefan went to Los Angeles. What year did you go?
81.
81, and spent some time with Don Preston, and obviously you wrote that fantastic piece of music, Don Preston's Day Off in Santa Monica. And so you got to play on the keyboard that was at the venue at the time of the fire that was recovered. And I mean, it's a piece of history in itself, isn't it?
But it's a self-built synthesizer, one of the first synthesizers he built himself, Don Preston, you know. Urban went to Essen, of course, to see them. You see that was in Essen.
This picture in the top left will be the top right for you. Here is Essen, Germany. And I'm assuming that the chap to Zappa's left is Lowell George.
Might be.
It looks very much like him. And then there's Don Preston. And of course, there's the picture of the fire at Montreux. And on the other side, on the other page here, is a picture of...
that's very interesting here. The first meeting of Urban Gweder and Frank Zappa. And Urban went to Frank and said, "Mr. Zappa, I presume." Coming back to Stanley and Livingston, you know. When Stanley found Livingston, I said, Mr. Livingston, I presume.
Yes.
That's so British, you know.
Yeah,
Underrated.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he was on the tour 1973.
Yes, yeah.
And years later, I wrote a composition. I got a guitar quartet asked me to write a piece, and I was on tour with FZ, and I was for Urban Gweder. And then it was in a jazz club. It was premiered. Urban Gweder was on stage and talked about the times in '73 when he was on tour with Frank Zappa.
Interesting.
So this is kind of Urban Gweder. After Hot Show was finished, he made a fan sign, one of the first, Hot Rats Times. It was just all about Frank Zappa. And you see Zappa reading the Hot Rats.
So here's a picture of Zappa
In the tour bus.
reading the actual.
Yeah, that was '73 probably as well, when
see.
Urban was on the tour bus. So you can see all the photos he made, and together with Ruth.
Ruth Underwood, yeah. Fantastic.
And I think for some reason something happened after 10 years. Urban thought, well, it's getting more commercial, and it stopped. And Urban Gweder had the largest Zappa archive on the whole world, and there were a lot of people being interested, you know.
Right.
And he sold it for only 5,000 francs, because with 5,000 francs he could buy 1 or 2 cows. And then he went up to Graubünden, really towards the mountains, and became a farmer for 20 years. And then he came back to Zurich again, and he did not give up his apartment for 20 years, and went back in this apartment. And from then on, I visited him on a regular basis, you know, just to talk. I don't want to talk about the early times, and I talked about the early times the whole afternoon, you know. He was very funny, he was very cynical, he was very humorous, you know, and he was not left-wing, pragmatic, dogmatic.
Interesting.
So Gweder and the Fox and Zappa, that was quite a good package at the time then.
Very interesting.
That was another thing that was very intriguing about him, is that he seemed to remember, and he had this sort of instant recall about, oh, well, we did this concert in Stuttgart, and Tommy Miles' solo was really good on that one, and then I did a really good solo when we played in Zurich, and he could just memorize special moments in these performances and somehow put them together and release them on a record. I think there's a pattern there as well.
A pattern, yeah.
And I think that pattern, you're taking things from different places. I think he used to do that with his orchestral music as well. He was constantly writing music. He would write drafts, and if he was writing music constantly on tour. Going back to the absolute pitch thing, I did a video called Was Frank Zappa Tone Deaf? Yeah, obviously he wasn't tone deaf, you know, but he uses those words when he was describing how he heard sounds and notes when he was with the George Duke, Napoleon Murphy Brock, Chester Thompson, Ruth Underwood band back in 73, 74, and saying that he couldn't hear what key they were in, you know. And I was trying to explain that when I read the real Frank Zappa book, the way he talked about composing, that he said I could hear it all in my head and just write it out. And I said, wow, I want to do that. I want to be like that. I want to be able to write that out, you know. And I was young, I was learning, so that was a little bit naive.
Maybe Stravinsky was in this position, but not totally.
But then Stravinsky was the one who made me reconsider this naive evaluation of what it took to be a composer, because Stravinsky said fingers could be great inspirers. And then he sort of was referring that you could just mess around on the piano if your fingers went this way, or you could try shapes out and different things, which is essentially how all composers compose their music. It's an intuitive thing. You sit, and obviously there are exceptions. We talked about serialism, Boulez, and approaching your music from a mathematical perspective. But I think most of the time composers just feel it, or they write things out and they
I guess so.
they amend it depending on what their ears tell them. You know. So obviously, even before I did that video, I knew that most composers don't hear everything in their head. But I think one of the things is that you're writing these ideas down, and it's more of maybe a mathematical assessment. Well, I know that fifths work really well. I know what they sound like. You get an idea of what it sounds if you don't have absolute pitch. I'm going on the basis here that most of us don't have that. Okay, so you get an idea, a flavor, a sort of notion of what you're writing, and then when you get to an instrument, then you can, you get the physical realization of it, and you go, oh yeah, that's quite nice. Or maybe I want to change it, or maybe I want to modify it. So I think a lot of his orchestral pieces, some of his orchestral pieces were built that way, were constructed that way. They sound like they were constructed that way. That you've got these different sketches that were put together and are assembled into one piece. And then the conceptual framework that he sort of, he built around that was, the anything, anytime, for no reason at all. And like, he's right, when you have a framework like that, anything is possible. Why can't you put these sketches together? Why can't they go side by side? Who's to say,
Which piece was it with the clarinet? That was a technician who worked with him, and he also plays the clarinet, And
it's an orchestral piece.
Yeah, an orchestral piece with a lot of clarinet.
Oh, so Mo and Herb's Vacation.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Maybe these clarinet things, maybe these are guitar licks, transcribed guitar.
It's possible,
I think. And so this is a patchwork composition. From my feel, it's not the Rite of Spring, with the great open sky, and this is this and this and this and this and this. Never really goes, wow, how fast, it never ends,
I think it's a very interesting piece of music.
Good. You're better than I am to do.
Purely for the fact that it's held together.
It's held together.
It's held together, but the means by which it's held together are what is the thing I find mesmerizing. Is how do you take such seemingly on the surface disparate elements and create a composition from that? I analyzed it for my PhD. Unless you actually listen very carefully, repeated listens, I think I'm going to again hazard a guess that most people would listen to it once. If they were interested in listening to the piece, they would listen to it once and then forget about it. But I listened to it over and over, and I had the score and I was following the notations. And then I sort of wanted to analyze it and see how this worked. And when you spend that time and you pay that much attention, you do see the patterns, you do see the continuity and the way it's constructed. That it's not just thrown together. There is
when was the point when you were realizing the patterns, by writing it out or just by listening to it? So a pattern here and another framed pattern somewhere else, and just by listening.
So you at the beginning of the piece, you have this very jagged violin melody. And then later in the piece, you hear it again, and then you go to the score, and you look, you say, oh, it's sharing the same notes as that principal theme at the beginning of the the movement, and then the more you look, you realize that okay, well, he's verticalized it as well. He's taken those notes and he's instead of them being horizontal, he's flipped it this way.
Yeah.
The same notes or variations of the notes or permutations of those notes. So that's really interesting. And sometimes you'd have the melody going on at the same time. You'd have the melody, divided between instruments, and being played at different times. Mm-hmm. Different parts of the melody being played simultaneously by different instruments.
Mm-hmm.
That was really interesting for me. But as I've said in other videos, it's not a piece of music that you would sit down and relax to, it's educational.
Well, it's not meant to be. Music has different functions.
Mm. What is your favorite Zappa orchestral piece?
Perfect Stranger. And the other one, two pieces.
On the Perfect Stranger
Yeah.
album, Dupree's Paradise?
Dupree's Paradise. That's okay too. It's a strange beginning. No, it's a nice beginning and a very strange connection. If you take this train, so why do you go into this train? It's a completely different. Maybe it's a boat or something, but it's not a train anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't get why does he do it like this, But the passages are nice. Yeah. I like this kind of how would you call it, atonality or it's good.
Yeah.
And really nice colors of instrumentation. I mean, piano 1, grand piano 2. I mean, this idea to get a stereo effect live, clarinet 1, clarinet 2, that's perfect.
I noticed in some of your scores you had done a similar thing where you would had diagrams of where you wanted musicians to be placed on stage.
Yeah. That with the orchestra, because that was because of the acoustic as well, because nobody ever had a concert like this. Well, Deep Purple went on stage, but we've never done it in Switzerland, so we had no experience. So we had to find a balance between the electric instrument and the other one, the acoustic instrument, And an electric instrument has to have a certain loudness, otherwise it's not electric anymore. It sounds, if you're the blink of the guitar louder than from the amplifier, something's wrong, You're in the rehearsal room of the Spotniks.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. I mean, Pedro's Dowry is a great one, and I think the version of Orchestral Favorites is the ones that they recorded at Voice Hall. That's just. My first interpretation, my first feeling about it was, this is evil. This music is so dark, but the sound,
even the sound.
Yeah, it was so dark, and I just loved it. I just thought that the way he combines the instruments, and then there's these kind of brass swells that happen, that they build on fifths, and then it becomes progressively more atonal, and then it builds and builds, and all of a sudden everything cuts out, and there's just this sort of little Eric Dolphy motif that's played by the flute and vibraphone. I used to go back and forth, just that section. I used to listen to it over and over again.
maybe 5 bars, maybe only 2 bars,
Yeah.
just to find out how is the effect of the woodwind and this kind of percussion, or maybe a horn section or something,
Yeah.
just to learn it, because I have no chance to find out myself.
Yeah.
So I have to learn it or getting closer to it.
Get a sort of an idea of what
An
it
idea,
might sound like
yeah.
if you were to do it.
Yeah,
I understand.
And so that's why I could do something like tympanum destroyer opening. I mean, Jan Fischer, the trumpet player and the flute player, there were 3 people who did all the
Yeah.
the wind
All the
stuff,
parts,
you know,
yeah.
and Hans-Peter HP did all the percussion. So you have to have an idea how you want to put it. I think it was impressive, but also not to play in the background for cooking. You really have to
You
concentrate
have to
on.
concentrate. It demands your attention.
It demands your attention. It's not made to it's not music.
No. Yeah, music. No, you're right.
No,
It's
it's
not
not.
music. It's music. That version from Orchestral Favorites was quite striking, and I remember chatting about the version that he did for the London Symphony Orchestra. Didn't quite.
I didn't like the whole production. Not at all, nothing, you know. And he was really pissed because they made their intermissions, you know. They were late. They were a little drunk, and the trumpet player couldn't. I mean, that's lousy. That's not, and so he had to leave it even, you know.
Yeah.
And that costed a hell of a lot of money for his hobby.
Yeah, it was very expensive, wasn't it? The whole project.
Yeah, it was.
I felt it was saturated with too many strings, and there was a little. The version from 1975 was much. It was more intimate. Everything was close. You could hear all the instruments. You know, I know it was a smaller orchestra, but everything seemed more present. In some ways, I can't help think you have all that money invested in this orchestra. You have this orchestra at your disposal. Wouldn't it be more advantageous to have them play some of your new compositions instead of, you know, doing reinterpretations of pieces that were already sounded good, at least to my ears, and seemed to be finished? Instead of, you know, reinterpreting them for a larger orchestra, I would have been much more interested in hearing some of his other orchestral music in that context, stuff that we hadn't heard before. We were also talking about, you know, the Perfect Stranger. I think Zappa went all out with that, knowing that he had Pierre Boulez as conductor. I think that
The guy
piece,
who ate tongue or what?
yeah, the sliced nose of a cow.
Yeah,
The translucent meat.
I think that's very important to. It fulfills an image, you know.
Yeah.
The best conductor for certain music in the world, the most. He's really accurate as well.
Yeah, he was
his finger, you know. It's a power finger.
He is. He was very, very formidable character, and I think the whole reference to the translucent meat, the sliced nose of a cow, it's a form of entertainment, isn't it? And it's also it's sort of classic Zappa, the deconstructionist, you know, where you deconstruct everything.
While eating a steak.
While eating a steak, of course.
Which doesn't have to be the middle of the planet.
No, not at all. And so The Perfect Stranger to me sounds like a complete composition. It almost sounds like he sat down in one session, or, you know, I mean one session over a period of weeks.
But a certain period.
A certain period where it was concentration on one piece from start to finish, as opposed to assembling drafts and sketches and trying to make sense out of that. And, you know,
I wonder when it was written.
It's an interesting question. I think
From when to when?
Yeah, I would love to know that.
Interesting.
I would love to know that. Because I think on the score it's at 1982 or something like that. the composition sounds complete, and you don't get that experience with some of the other composition. I think maybe he thought that, okay, if I'm going to get Pierre Boulez to you know, the wonderful opportunity.
That was a pressure.
Yeah.
I tell you, that's a pressure.
That is.
Zappa the big boy meets even the bigger boy.
Yeah.
A ruler of contemporary classical music. Part of history of contemporary classical music, and Zappa is not part of the contemporary classical music scene, not even
At
now.
least not at that time.
No. He's more than that.
Yeah. No, he is. But I think you make an interesting observation, because obviously Boulez helped invent this new music, at least after the Second World War, when, you know, they were more into the sort of mathematics, and they wanted to do away with the romantic idea philosophically, because the romantic idea is what fueled the Nazism. And I think after the Second World War, you know, Boulez, Stockhausen and Messiaen wanted to move away from that romantic idea.
And all these people, you know, they all went to the studios, you know, and they cut these tapes and were very technically, and they were very, yeah.
It was all about, you know, maths and exacting science of music. The other thing I found intriguing about the Boulez and Zappa connection was Boulez was a bad boy.
When the dog is outside of the house, he barks. When the dog is in the house, it doesn't bark, he bites.
These were quite provocative things to say at the time, and he wanted to deconstruct everything in the same way Zappa wanted to deconstruct certain things in music. I get a sense that Perfect Stranger, because it's so, it stands on its own as a great piece of music, you know, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It sounds complete, it sounds at rest. You listen to it and you can consume it as one totality instead of lots of little bits put together.
Okay, we have this contemporary classical music, orchestral music of Zappa, you know. Let's go to the level of communication, verbal communication, how you get on with people. Are you a lovely person? Are you a cynical person? There's an old proverb saying, the way you call into the wood, it echoes back, you know.
I guess you're talking about the person now, you know, it's like, one thing you know, I think is really important. I think people have a tendency to want to romanticize about the musician, the actor, the painter, whoever it may be.
The way they wish.
Yeah, the way they wish. They want that person to be. It's a form of projection, you know?
Yeah.
And you want to believe that he was or she, you know, they were good people.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't possibly think that, because it doesn't stop at art. It goes into many different parts of everyday life. What are you going to stop buying your favorite cereal because you find out that the CEO of the company is, a very untoward person, a corrupt person.
True.
Oh, I'm not going to eat that cereal anymore. So it doesn't stop at art. So that's why you have to make the distinction between, in terms of the art and creativity, the artwork and the person.
Yeah.
Who cares whether the person has a certain personality or not? I'm listening to the music, I'm watching the film, and I'm admiring and enjoying the artifact.
Okay, if you have the piece of art you really love, you know, but if this is overshadowed by so many comments, you know, and so many actings on TV or videos and so, it's sometimes very hard to enjoy it, because the person is so in the present, you know.
Yeah, that can happen, and
It's easy to consume good music. Like say, there was a British journalist, music journalist, and she said, "Well, people in bands, they just should do what they can best, make music, but they shouldn't talk, you know, because sometimes their EQ is so low, like a badly heated apartment in winter." She said, you know, and don't make rhymes about politics in the better world.
And this goes back to what we were saying earlier on about the interviews. You know, like you can read interviews from other rock people working within the rock music industry, you know, and it's just got nothing to say. It's just really quite dull, and in some cases quite disappointing. But with Zappa, he was perpetually entertaining. He always had something funny or interesting to say. I find him endlessly fascinating. I don't, you know, people say what he was like as a person. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, you know. It doesn't matter what kind of person he was. I just find him fascinating. I find his music fascinating too. But it doesn't mean that, you know, I have to like him. I have to like his personality. You know, you have to make that distinction. But sometimes, you know, going back to what this journalist said, you're right. Some artists,
it's not him.
Yeah, not Zappa. No, I think he was on a completely different level. But you know, some other musicians who
you know, but if Bob Geldof wants to be politician or Bono or all that stuff, you know, I don't want to criticize it or say it's good or bad, but it's just another level. Then it's another stage. Or Roger Waters, you know, talking for the UN and then all that stuff, giving them rules how to what to do and everything. That's borderline.
Yeah, I think you could definitely perceive it as being borderline, but that's what I love about Zappa is that
he's not borderline.
No, he's the brutal truth.
Yeah.
And most people don't like the truth.
Yeah.
They don't want to have anything to do with it. And if you speak your mind, if you say what's on your mind, and you know, you don't have to be aggressive about it. You can be, you know, cordial about it. But people, even then, people don't like it. They don't want to hear that, and that's how the world functions. That's why the world is like it is, because nobody wants to face the truth. Yeah, he's just like a fascinating figure and endlessly inspiring, and
endlessly inspired.
Yeah,
himself.
Yeah, he was always open to things, and you know, there are certain compositions. When I think of Zappa, there are certain. You could say, okay, there's certain pieces of music that are derivative. You know, no matter how eminent a composer is, they're always going to be referencing a predecessor. But there are some things that are just truly on their own, truly unique. One of them that comes to mind is Greggery Peccary, you know, The Adventures of Greggery Peccary. There's nothing...
But what is Greggery Peccary? It's not a composition from the beginning to the end. That's also a carpet. It's a genius. A genius work of from the Grand Wazoo, from some studios, from a solo of George Duke or something, or tryouts with so many things, you know, just made to one. Greggery Peccary, it's an incredible story, such a funny, such a crazy story, you know, and it could be real. That's how the world functions with the new brown clouds and all that stuff, you know. It functions like this. The Stenner pool, it exists, you know. Hopper.
Yeah.
Edward Hopper Stenner pool.
That's right. There's a reference.
And then he works with the tempos, you know. All of a sudden, George Duke, I think, is singing. That's a key piece of Zappa. I think that's more than contemporary music from Zappa. That's his genius.
Mm-hmm. Cucamonga. Mm-hmm. There's a little section in there that was performed with the 73 band, but it was instrumental.
Yeah.
And it appeared on Bongo Fury as Cucamonga, but it was the same musical section, but performed much slower, and Zappa is singing the melody at a very slow pace.
That is one of my favorite Zappa pieces of music. You know, I mean, there's many of them, but Greggery, Peccary, and Cucamonga, there's just so. There's nothing like that.
So let's say the family is very small. We had Boulez, we had Zappa. The two best concerts live I've ever seen is probably also Modern in Amsterdam with Zappa, with Greggery Peccary, and in Frankfurt at Boulez, Americ with the French guy with the reed cow things.
Oh yeah, Mr. Boulez.
Yeah. Which are made in the corridor of the train.
You were saying you spoke to him on the train.
Yeah, I made some jokes, something about are you the hammer or the
master?
Yeah, that with prominent people, you have a code. You have one chance.
Yeah.
If you say the right thing.
Yeah, it's finding the right words, finding your way in without being coming across as being a nuisance or a potential nuisance. It's a careful line, isn't it?
Read the room and read your opposite.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Stefan, for engaging in this conversation about Frank Zappa. It's been very, very.
It's the longest conversation about Frank Zappa I've ever had in my life.
Me too. And sometimes it's difficult to put these things into words, but I think we made a good attempt.
Yeah, and if you started again, it would be different.
It would be different.
Yeah. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, it was fun. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.